Welcome back to the Deep Dive. You're ready to dive deep into the world of rhetoric with us today.
Absolutely. It's going to be fascinating.
I'm ready to unlock some serious persuasion power. And it looks like we are diving into some pretty heavy stuff. We're talking about speeches that have literally changed the world.
That's right. We're talking Martin Luther King Jr., John F. Kennedy, Ronald Reagan, the big leagues.
No kidding.
Oh,
So before we get to those iconic speeches, I got to ask, what exactly is rhetoric? I mean, we throw that word around a lot.
we do. But it's more than just fancy talk, you know? At its core, rhetoric is about using language effectively to persuade. It's about understanding how to use words to influence thought and action.
Okay, so it's like more than just arguing, more like strategic communication.
Exactly. Imagine you're trying to convince a friend to try that new restaurant downtown. You wouldn't just say, hey, it's good, you should go. You'd probably talk about the amazing food, the cool ambiance, right? Maybe even mention that they have your friend's favorite dish. That's rhetoric in action.
You're totally right. I never thought of it like that. Okay, so how does this Harvard course we are diving into today approach this whole art of persuasion thing?
They break it down into three main modes of appeal. And don't worry, we'll make it super clear, no jargony terms here.
Perfect, because I was about to ask about that ethos, pathos, logos. Sounds a little intimidating, to be honest.
I hear you. Okay, so the first mode of appeal is all about credibility. Think of it this way. You're more likely to trust a doctor's advice than, say, your uncle's, right? Even if your uncle means well.
Totally. Expertise matters. Makes sense.
Right. That's ethos, establishing your authority to speak on a subject. Now, the second mode is all about appealing to your audience's emotions.
Okay, and before you go on, doesn't that sound a little manipulative? Appealing to emotions?
It can be,
Mhm.
but it can also be incredibly powerful when used ethically. Think about those ASPCA commercials with Sarah McLachlan's song. They get you right in the feels, don't they?
Oh man, heartbreaking, but they work. Every
Oh.
single time.
Exactly. And that's because they tap into our empathy and compassion. It's not just about cold, hard facts. It's about connecting with people on a human level. That's the power of pathos.
Wow, okay. So we've got credibility and emotions. What's the third mode?
Logic and reason, or logos. Think of it like building a case. You need strong evidence to back up your claims. You need facts, statistics, logical arguments to make your point convincing.
It's like you always say, show, don't just tell, right?
Exactly. Now, the course also delves into these things called inductive and deductive reasoning, which sound way more complicated than they really are.
Okay, I'm listening, but you might have to break those down for me.
You use them all the time without even realizing it. Think about it this way. Have you ever noticed how you crave certain foods when the weather changes?
Yeah, soup when it's cold, ice cream when it's hot. Pretty basic stuff.
Exactly. Your brain is making an association based on past experiences. That's inductive reasoning. Basically, you're drawing a general conclusion based on specific observations.
So that's how we learn patterns, make sense of the world around us.
Exactly. Now, deductive reasoning is like the flip side. It's about starting with a general principle and then applying it to a specific case. Like, you know that eating a balanced diet is important for your health, right?
Pretty essential stuff.
So when you're offered a greasy burger and fries for lunch, you might choose a salad instead because you know it's the healthier option. That's deductive reasoning.
Wow, okay. It's like our brains are constantly gathering information, making connections, and using those connections to make decisions. Wild.
Exactly. And the really cool thing is that effective communicators, the real masters of persuasion, they understand all of this and use these techniques strategically.
Okay, so getting back to those iconic speeches we talked about earlier, the ones that gave me chills just thinking about them, how does all of this play out in, say, Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech?
Oh, Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, that's a masterclass in rhetoric. He weaves together all three modes of appeal so masterfully, it's hard to even know where to begin.
Well, let's start with, I don't know, maybe an example.
Okay, so when Dr. King talks about his dream that one day his children will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, he's not just appealing to logic. He's appealing to our sense of fairness, our sense of justice. Those are deeply held moral values.
It's like he's reaching across time, you know,
Yeah,
speaking to something deep inside all of us.
exactly. And at the same time, he's establishing his own credibility by drawing on his own experiences, his lived experience as a Black man living in a segregated society.
Yeah.
He's not just talking the talk, he's walking the walk. And he's doing all of this while painting this picture of a better future, a future we all want to be a part of.
It's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Really powerful. But it makes you think about, like, the flip side of this whole persuasion thing, right? I mean, it could be used for good or for bad.
You're absolutely right. Understanding rhetoric is like having a superpower, but like
Yeah.
with great power comes great responsibility.
Okay, I love that. It's true, though, right? I mean, we've all seen how easily people can be manipulated, especially with language.
Exactly. Which is why this next part is so important, because
Yeah.
knowing how to spot those rhetorical tricks, the logical fallacies, like that's your defense against manipulation.
Biological what now?
Logical fallacies. They're basically flaws in reasoning that make an argument unsound, even if it sounds good on the surface. Think of them like rhetorical red flags.
Ooh, I like that. Rhetorical red flags.
Mhm.
Okay, give me an example.
Okay, let's see. Have you ever heard someone say something like, "Oh, you would say that, you're just biased"?
Like, all the time. It's like the oldest trick in the book.
Exactly. That's called an ad hominem fallacy.
Yeah.
Instead of actually engaging with your argument, they attack you personally to try to discredit you.
Oh, so it's like a distraction technique.
Exactly. It's about shutting down the conversation, not furthering it.
So being able to spot these fallacies, it's like having a BS detector for bad arguments.
You got it. You start to see through the smoke and mirrors and get to the heart of the matter, to the actual arguments.
Okay, so ad hominem is one red flag. What's another one we should be on the lookout for?
Okay, let's see. This one pops up all the time, the slippery slope fallacy. When someone claims that one small action will inevitably lead to a whole chain of negative
Well,
consequences.
like, if we let them ban plastic straws, next thing you know, they'll be coming for our forks and knives.
Exactly. It's all about fear-mongering, creating this sense of panic, but there's usually no real evidence to support that chain of events.
It's about shutting down critical thinking, right?
Yeah.
Making people afraid to even consider the first step.
Exactly. Now, this actually reminds me of something else this Harvard course delves into. They look at how rhetoric is used on both sides of, like, even the most divisive issues. And specifically, they look at Sarah Brady and Charlton Heston's arguments for and against gun control.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, those are two very different perspectives.
Right. So, Sarah Brady, in her speech at the 1993 Democratic National Convention, she uses a very powerful form of inductive reasoning. She shares her personal story.
Right. She talks about her husband, Jim Brady, who was shot during the assassination attempt on President Reagan, right?
Exactly. It's such a powerful example, right? By drawing on her personal experience with gun violence, she's not only making a logical case for stricter gun control measures, she's also making an incredibly powerful emotional appeal.
Right. She's showing the human cost of gun violence, not just talking about statistics.
Exactly. She's appealing to both our heads and our hearts. Now, on the other side of the issue, you have Charlton Heston, who was a staunch supporter of the Second Amendment. He often used a more deductive reasoning approach in his speeches.
So instead of starting with a personal story, he would start with a general principle.
Exactly. He'd start with the premise that the Second Amendment guarantees an individual's right to bear arms, right? And then he'd argue that any attempt to restrict that right is a violation of the Constitution.
Okay, so he's appealing to a different set of values. Values that resonate really strongly with his base.
Exactly. And it just goes to show that, like, effective rhetoric is about more than just using the right words or techniques. It's also about understanding your audience, their values, their beliefs, their fears, and their hopes.
So it's about tailoring your message to your audience. Like, you wouldn't use the same approach to convince a 5-year-old to eat their vegetables as you would to convince a room full of executive to invest in your startup.
Exactly. Context is everything. But, you might be wondering how all of this applies to other forms of communication, like, say, writing.
Well, yeah, actually, I was just thinking that. Does this whole rhetoric thing apply when I'm writing an email at work? Or even like a really good social media post?
Absolutely. The principles of rhetoric, they're universal. Whether you're writing, speaking, creating a presentation, or even just having a casual conversation, it's all about understanding how to use language effectively to connect with your audience and persuade them to see your point of view.
Okay, so it's like rhetoric is everywhere. We just don't always realize it.
Exactly. And to illustrate this, the Harvard course actually uses some really interesting examples from history, speeches from the Red Scare era, for example.
Oh, wow. Now, that was a wild time in history. So much fear, so much suspicion.
Exactly. And they analyzed two very different speeches from that era. One is Joseph McCarthy's Enemies Within speech.
McCarthy, as in McCarthyism.
Uh,
Wasn't he, like, notorious for his persuasive but not necessarily truthful speeches?
Exactly. And that's why it's such a great example of rhetoric being used, for better or for worse, to influence public opinion.
Okay, so that's one side of the coin, the McCarthy side, using
Yeah.
fear and intimidation. What about the other side?
Right. So they contrast McCarthy's speech with Margaret Chase Smith's Declaration of Conscience speech, and she was one of the few senators who dared to stand up to McCarthy.
Wow, that took some guts.
Right. And her speech is still studied today because it's just so well crafted, so powerful in its message of reason and courage.
It's a good reminder that while rhetoric can be used to manipulate and deceive, it can also be used to speak truth to power.
Couldn't agree more. And it brings us back to that idea of ethics that we were talking about earlier.
Right, it's not just about being persuasive, it's about using those persuasive powers for good.
Exactly. It's about using our understanding of language to promote truth, justice, understanding, not to manipulate or deceive.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But, we've been talking a lot about using rhetoric to persuade others, right? What about using it to persuade ourselves?
Oh, that's a great question. It really speaks to the idea that rhetoric isn't just about influencing others, it's about understanding and shaping our own thoughts, beliefs, and actions as well.
So you're saying we use rhetoric on ourselves all the time?
All the time. I mean, think about it. We're constantly having these internal dialogues with ourselves, right? Weighing pros and cons, making decisions, trying to talk ourselves into or out of things, right?
So by understanding the principles of rhetoric, we can actually become more persuasive, more influential with ourselves.
Absolutely. We can learn to frame our thoughts in a more positive and empowering way, challenge our own limiting beliefs, motivate ourselves to achieve our goals.
Whoa, that's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
Yeah.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, understanding rhetoric, it's not just about analyzing famous speeches or winning arguments. It's about having more control over our own thoughts and actions. It's about being more intentional with the language we use, both internally and externally.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the power of language, all language, and using that power to create positive change in our own lives and in the world.
Powerful stuff. Speaking of powerful language, this Harvard course also covers presidential rhetoric, right? And I remember reading something about John F. Kennedy and Ronald Reagan
Yeah.
as being like masters of communication.
Oh, absolutely. They both had this incredible ability to connect with people through their words. And they're both really skilled at using rhetoric to inspire, persuade, and shape public opinion.
So JFK and Reagan, two very different presidents, two very different styles, but both incredibly effective communicators. What made them so good?
Well, JFK, he loved using these rhetorical devices that would make his speeches super memorable. Like, remember that term we talked about earlier, anti-metabolite?
Anti-batab.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's when you reverse the order of words or phrases, right?
You got it. And his most famous line, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Perfect example of anti-metabol.
So simple, but so effective. It just gets stuck in your head.
Right. JFK understood that language isn't just about information, it's about creating a feeling, an emotional connection with your audience.
Okay, that makes sense. And then, of course, you have Ronald Reagan, the great communicator. I feel like he had a totally different style, right?
Yeah, totally different. Reagan, he was a master storyteller. He knew how to connect with everyday Americans by telling these relatable stories, personal anecdotes.
Didn't he have that story about, I think it was a bomber pilot making a rough landing?
Yes, I remember that one. So the pilot, he's bumping along the runway, and when they finally come to a stop, he turns to his crew and says, well, boys, one thing's for sure, we're not lost. We're right here.
It's funny, right, but it also kind of sneaks in this message of optimism, resilience.
Totally. And that's what made Reagan so effective. He wasn't just lecturing you. He was drawing you in with a story, making you feel like you were right there with him.
It's like the difference between reading a textbook and listening to a really captivating storyteller.
Exactly. And that's, I think, one of the biggest takeaways from studying all of these master communicators. It's not just about what you say, it's about how you say it. It's about, finding your own voice.
Yeah, and style.
Yes. Being authentic, because at the end of the day, the most persuasive people are the ones who genuinely believe what they're saying.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here today. We've talked about the history of rhetoric, the different modes of appeal, those sneaky logical fallacies, ethical considerations. But if there's one thing I'm taking away from this deep dive, it's that rhetoric is about so much more than just winning arguments.
100%. It's about understanding the power of language and using that power to connect with people, to build bridges, to make a difference. And the coolest part is, these skills, they're not just for presidents and politicians, they're for everyone.
They're for all of us. So to our listener, next time you're, I don't know, reading a book, Watching a movie, scrolling through social media, even just having a conversation with a friend. Pay attention to the language being used. See if you can spot those rhetorical devices, those logical fallacies. You might be surprised at how much rhetoric shapes our perceptions of the world.
It's everywhere once you start to see it.
It's like a secret code. And now you have the key to unlock it.
And who knows? You might even discover a hidden talent for persuasion yourself.
That's it for our deep dive into the art of persuasion. We hope you enjoyed the journey and that you feel empowered to use your words to make a difference.
Until next time.